work. What is it? And how can you avoid it? Well, in August of 2021, it appears that 4.6 million people figured out how to avoid it and they just quit. I think this is fascinating because the pandemic is still going on, regardless of how many people aren't wearing masks in crowded, sold out arenas. And we know there's been unemployment going on since the beginning, right? They just kind of threw all this money out, the feds did, because they don't know what people make, right? I mean, the state unemployment money in any state is fucking dog shit. But the feds at the beginning were like, I don't know, 600 a week on top of whatever, is that good enough? They don't know. That's the thing. And that was going on, and basically it ended in September, right? So, if you quit, you're not going to get anything on unemployment for all these people who quit. 4.6 million, nearly 5 million people quit their jobs. And most of it was like retail, service, things like that. So that, to me, speaks volumes even more so about this, because they're not going to get any unemployment money. They're not going to get any money from the job they just quit. So either they had a better job lined up, or they've decided to put themselves over capital, which I think is great. Or they want to put their happiness before, dealing with the shitty public, which quite often the public is very shitty. I still think most people are good, but if you think about the situation where you have, let's just take restaurants, for example. You have shortened hours, you have shortened staff, right? Nobody's fully staffed, haven't been since the beginning. And if you have people who are going out to eat, and now it's just like crowded restaurants, but they don't have anywhere near the staff, that means your wait times are going to be longer. Your orders might be messed up or different because, you've got people who are probably working who've never worked in the service industry before. There's all kinds of things that might contribute to people being even shittier than they are normally. You know what I'm saying? So I think this is really fascinating because there's a shift happening clearly from where we were. Like, we're on a different strand now. We're like the Berenstain Bears, right? The old way of doing things is out. I don't give a shit who you think you are. You're an old school. You want people to go back into the office because you think you got to have meetings whenever you want. Fuck you. Nobody's going to do it. All right? Well, I don't say nobody, but a lot of people don't want to do it because you've given them a taste of freedom. So if they can find a way to do something else, they're going to do it. And 4.6 million people decided, I don't need this. Screw you. I'm out of here. And, remember when, I think it was like midsummer, and they were having trouble hiring, and there was all this talk in the media, because the media is always behind corporations like McDonald's or Walmart or whatever bullshit company there is in this country. There's a lot of them. And, there was just all this talk about unemployment, and some states were like, this is probably a lot of the conservative states were just kind of like, well, fuck that. We're going to end unemployment early, push them in and get this market going. We got to get that market going. That's all that matters. Don't you understand? Capital, Mr. Beale. Do you know what I'm saying? You have meddled with the forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and you will atone. Anyway, when they were doing that, what was interesting to me was that you had all these crybaby corporations who were going to Congress and lobbying, basically, and crying that they couldn't hire anyone, that nobody wanted to work for $7 an hour in their shitty drive-thru with their shitty food or in their shitty mall and push their crappy products that were made in China, rather than paying them more. So if you've got somebody, forget about whether they're on unemployment or they work for somebody else, they're making more money than you would give them. Why would they come back to work for you? You could have offered them more money. I guarantee you, if you had a $30 an hour job at McDonald's working the drive-thru, you'd have a line around the block. But you didn't want to do that. I think it's interesting because I still don't understand what's going on. I still don't understand what jobs are out there. It's the unemployment thing's over. It's been over a month. I'm sure things will kind of sort of lopsidedly land on the runway in some way, and the runway being like the old way of doing things for people who are kind of stuck dealing with the public because they've built their resume around it and it's hard for them to switch. But at the moment, I feel like there's a chance here for a great shift for people to to be empowered. There must be people who are of that 4.6 million. It's kind of starting to rain here. I love the rain. It's fall. Happy Halloween, guys. Who found online jobs. Maybe they've saved up during the pandemic, or maybe they were just doing things part-time. I don't know what the reason is behind the 4.6 million, but let me just play a couple of video clips right here of things that sort of prompted me to talk about this on this week's episode. It's good to be back.
Guys, what is this? Guys, all of you out right now.
Jared, I'm here to tell you that I'm quitting.
What? Go!
So I'm thinking about Joey not because it's the 10-year mark of that hilarious stunt, but because this month, more than 4 million workers across the country became Joeys. The month that Joey quit his job, just 1.5% of workers did the same. That quit rate is what bosses call churn, and some amount of quitting and switching jobs is normal, even in the midst of the Great Recession. But in August, the number was nearly double that, with almost 3% of workers, 4.3 million of them, leaving their jobs. Restaurants, bars, and hotels have always seen more turnover than in other jobs, hovering normally at around 4%. In August, the numbers were literally off the charts at 6.8%. That means roughly 1 out of every 15 workers in restaurants, bars, and hotels quit in August. The next highest turnover came in retail, which also isn't surprising, but the numbers were up everywhere: healthcare, manufacturing, white-collar jobs, you name it. At the beginning of the pandemic, 1 million workers were being laid off every single day, and we haven't yet gotten to the unemployment rate that we had in March 2020. In September, the Bureau of Labor Statistics found 7.7 million people unemployed. But there's another 6 million that they define as people who want a job but don't count as part of the labor force because they haven't looked for a job in the last 4 weeks. On top of that, there was another 1.7 million they call marginally attached to the labor force. Having 4.3 million people quit in August threatens to amplify a vicious cycle that's already punishing workers on the job. When businesses are short-staffed, that means the workers who are still there have to pick up the slack. It also means customers are seeing worse service, which takes customer behavior from its customary level of absolutely hellish and ramps it up to worst people on earth status.
She says over 30 million Americans quit their jobs so far this year through August. We have never seen anything like that. Closest was 2019, when 28 million quit through August. This is the Great Resignation plus the Great Reassessment of Work, something that she's been tracking. Leave that up on the screen just one more minute. For those of you who can see this, you see a gigantic drop in quitting during the Great Recession. And then you see it ticking up as the economy slowly sort of starts to churn. Then you see another catastrophic plunge of workers quitting their jobs during the pandemic because, of course, you know, if you had a job, things were rough and you were trying to hold on to it. A lot of people getting laid off, a lot of people losing their jobs entirely. Then you see a massive spike to the levels that we are experiencing now. Heather wrote a piece that was very interesting, also in the Washington Post. She quotes a couple of experts here who say the 4 main causes of all these workers quitting are a backlog of workers who wanted to resign before the pandemic, but ultimately held on a bit longer because they were worried about whether they'd be able to get something else. Burnout, particularly among frontline workers in healthcare, food service, and retail. Pandemic epiphanies, in which people experience major shifts in identity and purpose that led them to pursue new careers and start their own businesses, and an aversion to returning to offices after a year or more of working remotely. You've got a bit of a tight labor market. Workers feel like they have a few options available to them. They're sick and tired of being put on the front lines with low pay. They saw the way that their workers risked their lives during the pandemic, and they're doing something about it, Sire.
Yeah, it's stunning. I mean, and there was some speculation around vaccine mandates. The only actual place where that might apply is in the healthcare worker. But as we discussed here, a lot of studies show that's actually pretty minuscule in terms of the terminations or the people who are resigning, although maybe they self-reported differently and they left their job. So it's certainly possible. But
You also
I don't
see
think that you would see it. You would see it much more precipitously if that were the case.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you look at the chart, for those of you who are watching, you can see there's a continual gradual incline.
Right.
It isn't like, it's flat and then the vaccine mandate comes into place and there's a gigantic spike, which is what you would expect. And also,
Exactly right.
it's very politically convenient. People who didn't care anything about the strikes that were going on, about what was going on in the labor market until they could tie their political ideology to it, save it.
Luckily, we've been tracking this actually for a long time.
We have.
And for this month, this is really interesting. So let's put this up there. August was the record month at which Americans quit their jobs, 4.3 million. And specifically, we can look at all of those segments, which Crystal just talked about. 892,000 quits in food and accommodation,
Whoa.
720,000 quits in retail, 534,000 quits in health and social assistance. Now, I cannot help but notice that all of those involve something, dealing with other people.
Right.
And it turns out that many of these jobs, many, sectors in particular, where workers have been just treated like crap for a long time
Yep, and
and
have to
been
take it.
crapped all over by customers, bosses for low wages, are like, hey, you know what? Screw you.
So, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. What do you think? What's it going to look like? I am in sort of the same boat. I'm an artist and I sell work and I get grants, but haven't mastered the art of being able to survive, even at a poverty level. If I could just make what I would make being the assistant manager of the Long John Silver drive-thru, I would take it in a heartbeat. I'm not like a million miles away from that with what I'm doing, but I'm still not there, so I have to start thinking about what I'm going to do myself. But I would be interested to know where you think this is going, because it can't be that we go back to this. This would be too much. Too much of a Psycho setting, like Psycho in the sense that he was running this hotel, but he had his dead mom in a rocking chair, and he would put on her wig. Like, clearly, he's not able to get over something, or maybe he killed her. I don't really know. I've seen it many times, but the point is that the old world is dead, and trying to prop it up not only isn't going to work, but you don't have very much support for even trying, I think. So that's where I stand. I want to know what you think. Pop Culture Fridays, we're back. Every Friday, I'm going to put up something, rant about something. Not rant, just talk. I just want to talk. And if you think it should be the old world, I didn't mean to offend you, but I think it's dumb. I think it didn't serve a lot of people. A lot of people were underpaid, and you could say, well, there's a clip of Dave Ramsey out there where he's saying, like, if you don't like your job, just quit.
This is a free country. Quit! Get out! Stop!
Which is good advice, but he's also like, he's got his own view of the world, and that's great. But it's not. There have to be options for people who aren't happy, even if the options have to be created either by themselves or through advice within the circles that they live in the community. Because when you trap people, the same kind of thing that happens when you trap a raccoon, which I hope never happens to you, by the way. Never happened to me, but I can imagine it's terrible. You trap a raccoon in a corner, they're going to put out their claws, and they're going to fight their way out there. They're going to do something crazy, because desperate beings do desperate things sometimes. And so there have to be better options, because it's not like I know that you can have you think I'm doing this in Detroit, and I know that the world or the country thinks that they could just throw Detroit down the drain and let it fall. Well, it's going to come, things come back to you. It's not like people are, the energy that happens to a place like Detroit or Southside Chicago or Baltimore, Skid Row in LA, that stuff comes back to a society that allows it to fester or creates it or ignores it. And we can get into a debate all day long about how they got there and how they should get out. I'm just saying the fact that they exist, that those problems exist, to circle back, including people who have to go do something that not only that they don't like, but doesn't make any sense anymore. Like, you know, going somewhere else to send an email when you could do it from your bed. It just seems kind of stupid, and it seems like we've been launched 50 years into the future with this thing, and there's no going back. Thanks for watching. Patreon.com/Arthouse43 if you want to support the show. Arthouse43 produces a lot of podcasts. This one, Art House Radio. You want $3 a month? Come on, $3 a month. I'll give you special episodes, things like that, and yeah, just your brother or your sister out there trying to make a buck like you, and just have a conversation. Mostly, it's 99%. It's just a conversation. I'd love to hear what you have to say, but if you can go to the Patreon or subscribe here, that would be awesome. Even better. All right. See you next week.